My name is Brian Cole. I'm the Executive Director of Mindwise Innovations, a nonprofit behavioral health organization based outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Our mission is to help people better understand and address their behavioral health challenges. Our engagements, our products, our services are designed to meet people where they are, be it children within elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, trade schools, universities, be it adults in the workplace or anyone in any community anywhere. One of our largest efforts is the work we do around suicide prevention. Our program, Signs of Suicide, is currently experienced by millions of students across the globe in well over 20 countries. We recognize more work needs to be done to prevent suicide, and because of that, we're constantly evaluating, establishing new practices, determining new ways of reaching those in need. Furthermore, we continue to ask the question, how might music play a role in preventing suicide? According to the CDC, the rate of suicides in the U.S. increased 4% from 2020 to 2021. This after 2 consecutive years of decline in 2019 and 2020. We know music benefits mental health. What if, by better understanding exactly why and how music benefits mental health, we could help minimize depression, ultimately reducing thoughts and attempts of suicide? Researchers, in fact, recently found that during the COVID pandemic, music listening was positively associated with life satisfaction, while, on the other hand, other types of media use, TV, videos, movies, were negatively associated with life satisfaction. While there is so much we already know about music, we know in some cases it helps destigmatize mental health. We know it's also been a vehicle for suicide awareness efforts, but can it provide the hope needed for those who need it most?
Well, good evening. Welcome to the We Are All Music Foundation's Power of Music episode 7, with tonight's focus being on music and mental wellness. We really now stand at the cusp of a dramatically improved level of understanding of how music can, positively impact the lives of those suffering. And our hope is that this ultimately leads to, better policy decisions, better funding decisions, and a greater appreciation for just how vital music is to help us confront the various challenges that we do face in our society. And so I'm very happy to be joined with my colleague, Brian Cole. Brian is part of our growing Music Impact Research Center. This is a growing body of domain experts that's helping us to really survey the world and curate what we think is the best and most relevant research that documents the positive impact of music in our lives.
Well, first, Peter, it's great to see you. I thank you for that introduction, and I'm honored to be here this evening. I from the bottom of my heart, it just means the world to me that we're having this conversation tonight. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge just something that happened in the news today. We're all hearing about it, we're all reading about it, and this is the passing of Stephen Boss, DJ Twitch. I don't want to say much more than that, other than we love you, Twitch. And if anything, this is precisely why we're having the conversation tonight. Twitch died by suicide. And this is why Wham is doing what Wham is doing. This is why we're here to have this conversation. So you'll see posted just now the 988 number. Please, for you, for anyone, for any loved ones, should you need someone to talk to, dial 988. 988 was a number that was instituted July 16th of this year, crisis lifeline. So thinking about you, Twitch. I never start talking about the numbers, but I want to share with you some of the numbers for perspective. Out of respect for Twitch, 50,000 people die of suicide every year. That's about 11 people. It's one person every 11 minutes. So again, I rarely start with the numbers, but I think more reason for us to have this conversation, more reason for my excitement to be here this evening. Um, Peter, you referenced 2017. Yeah, a lot happened in 2017, and Logic, the rapper, published or wrote a song called 1-800-273-8255. Some of you might know that number as the former lifeline for suicide prevention. And Dr. John Draper has acknowledged that that year, when that song came out, they found a 27% increase in calls to the lifeline, to that number. And I think the remarkable thing about what Logic did in that song was facilitate three things: awareness obviously for the number, awareness of suicide. It, in many cases, also prevented suicide because of the 27% increase to the lifeline. But it may also have been an intervention. In fact, Dr. John Draper has said that based on that 27% increase in calls, he's relatively confident that that song alone saved potentially 200, 250 lives that year. So it's a song. Music saves lives. 2017 put a stake in the ground. That song put a stake in the ground and said, hey, we can facilitate awareness, we can facilitate prevention, and we might even be able to intervene in the moment needed most through music. Peter, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's
When you first heard
fascinating
about
that
that.
we have this growing interconnectedness with the internet and handhelds, and not only does that make it possible to have these types of shared experiences where a positive message can be delivered, and that really does have an impact on how people react to things, but it's even now more rooted in biometrics and the ability to measure, for example, the relationship between listening to music and dopamine and its various ways of impacting our moods and how we make decisions and choices, and also more broadly, the issue of stress and managing that stress, and this goes far beyond even the issues of depression, but into issues of elder care and almost so many other facets of our life. And what's remarkable is just how many of these things music has an ability to positively impact. If we look, for just example, briefly at the issue of elder care, there are real challenges with having to rely on things like antipsychotic drugs or sedation or restraints, and where we're seeing more and more, real life examples of where, not only just music therapy as a tool, but music as part of a quality of life, environmental factor that can lessen the needs for all of these, more heavy-handed interventions. And again, I think ultimately, this is the common thread, create this, positivity sort of infrastructure, if you will, that allows us to deal with the challenges of life that don't otherwise ever seem to be getting any easier. So it's compelling, it's low-hanging fruit, and I think this type of research will hopefully, again, guide decision makers to better utilize this.
Yeah, you use the word infrastructure, language and tools, and sometimes that language is provided through lyrics in a song. Sometimes that language is provided through training and education. And it's also the tools. And that, I feel, is where, at least in our work within Mindwise, really, really focused on tools where and when needed. How do I address the depression I'm feeling? What tools do I need to address the depression I'm feeling? And we know music will play a role, does play a role. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about was this move from sensationalism to a sense of hope, resilience. Two interesting effects some of you might already be familiar with, the Werther effect and the Papageno effect. The Werther effect, simply stated, media types sensationalizing suicide. And often as a result of that sensationalism, creating a contagion. We see that. We see that across, we've seen that historically. We continue to see that across some media types. Papageno effect, however, really focuses on the story, focuses on hope, resilience, how one overcame that desire tendency. The Papageno effect recognizes the use of safe language, how we talk about suicide. The Papageno effect also through lyrics, and we can cite a handful of recent songs, even as recent as just a few weeks ago with Taylor Swift's latest album, It's Okay Not to Be Okay. So this interesting shift in media and various media types from Werther to Papageno, I think we're seeing more and more of, and certainly encouraging musicians, other media types, media forums, to adhere to that safe language.
You know, I'm fascinated by this concept of the Papageno effect, and you know, we talked as we were preparing for this about how music is a little bit like olfaction in the sense that it can transport you back to, you know, times in your life or places where it can bring comfort. It can bring again, actually really quite demonstrable physiological benefits. We see this with reduced heart rates. We see this with again, professions of reduced levels of stress where there are surveys. And it's maybe worth mentioning that one of our grantee partners, Musicians on Call, works very closely with you know, major hospitals and hospital chains here in the country to help deliver music experiences to those that are really in, you know, if you think about it, it's hard to imagine being more in need than when you're in a hospital, you know, suffering from presumably major life event. And we're beginning to now measure things like patient length of stay and recovery rates. And again, it really, you know, speaks to the pervasiveness of stress as you know, a negative impact in our life. And you know, without really any side effects, music's ability to help you know, mitigate a lot of those. And you know, we probably never be able to reduce it to zero, but it's hard to think of lower hanging fruit, you know, than this to help really, you know, again, make a positive impact.
So in terms of, again, positive impacts, we talked about awareness, we've talked about prevention, we've talked about intervention. In the event where a suicide does occur, there has been some research, some really encouraging research. Edmonds et al., 2016, conducted some research in a post-vention setting. Post-vention setting, again, are those efforts made upon someone's suicide in community, efforts made with family. And in this research, they were able to identify some positive effects with music around moods, relationships, engagement, social connectedness. So once again, there's this fertile foundation of research being done, has been done, continuing to be done around awareness, prevention, intervention, and now post-vention. I find that incredibly, incredibly encouraging.
So maybe taking a little bit of a step back,
Yeah.
what kind of practical things can we think about doing to move the needle even further in this direction? And specifically thinking about, you know, where bottlenecks might be that either improve funding or focus on research might be able to positively address.
Yeah, I think there are a number of areas that immediately come to mind. One is music therapists, continued partnerships, music therapists, continued partnerships with behavioral healthcare organizations, music therapists continuing to better understand what sits behind suicide prevention, intervention. So continued training for music therapists. You've already talked about some of the kind of biometric feedback research around exactly what's happening through feedback, and might we, in opportune or in the right moments, serve up music to tamp abate, address what an individual might be feeling, whether it's anxiety or depression. We know that depression in particular, major depression tends to, we see more suicide is the result of major depression more than just about anything else. So that biometric feedback certainly will play a role. And then there are also some things being done around kind of digital therapeutics, digital music therapeutics. So research being done through neuroimaging to better understand what music, how music is evolving, what happens in the brain, and what music specifically could be served up to address what the brain is encountering or experiencing. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the neuroimaging brain health is really, really intriguing. More specifically, the kind of music that's being composed specifically to address what is being read in the brain. So a lot. Peter, there's so much opportunity for research. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but so much opportunity for continued research. The foundation is there around awareness, prevention, intervention, postvention, digging in and better understanding what's happening in the brain, specifically tied to music, is a logical next step.
So obviously a lot of fertile ground on the research side. It's probably worth mentioning again that in terms of what we see on the ground, there are a lot of fascinating developments, and it's probably worth, again, highlighting one of our grantees here, Hip Hop Public Health, and the awareness that they have been raising within the musicians community and the hip hop community, and spanning all measure of health issues. For example, during COVID, they were able to, really help spread positive health messaging that was needed. We see more musicians, I think, positively contributing to the messaging, and we hope to continue to nurture that however we can.
I speak to musicians almost on a regular basis, Peter, and it's interesting how few musicians understand or realize the role they could play as music therapists. So I think that, I don't know, Peter, for lack of a better expression, job training, the opportunity for more and more musicians to better understand the role they could play as music therapists. I think there's opportunity there as well. So we're working with a handful of an organization comprised of music therapists in the Boston area, and we're tasked with training them up, helping them better understand, again, what to look for from a prevention, potentially intervention perspective. So much can be done, but I get excited about what we're learning about specifically what's happening in the brain tied to various compositions. So a little more to come on that in a minute, but let's jump back into. So let's spend some time. You touched on this already a little bit, but let's spend a little bit of time kind of deconstructing the song, whether it was Logic's song or any song, and that physiological, kind of psychological impact. Look, we can't deny that there is a dopamine response, the feel-good hormone, the neurotransmitter that kind of plays a significant role around our emotional, cognitive, behavioral functioning. Frisson, this emotional contagion. I mean, Peter, you shared a song with me this morning. Just this morning, you shared a song, and not to sound silly, but it gave me the chills. And I can only imagine if there were others in the room with me, we would have felt the same thing. That emotional contagion, the goosebumps, whatever it is, but recognizing there's a physiological change. Again, further research to better understand exactly what's happening. What was it about that song that made me feel good and precipitated that physiological reaction?
Self-regulation is a conversation we have often. Self-regulation around our mental health, self-regulation around our anxiety, depression, what have you. But anxiety, stress specifically, those neural activation patterns, what's happening in our brain when we listen to familiar music. You touched on that earlier with the olfactory response. No different than how smell triggers a memory, same thing is happening with music. We know that those activation patterns are triggered upon listening to a song that is all too familiar to us. And then, oh, go ahead, Peter.
Well, I was just gonna reinforce the notion that we know so many of these things in our heart and have just again really struggled to convey them in scientifically or statistically robust ways. And things like the survey tools that handheld devices really make possible, open up all kinds of avenues for us to understand these links better. Data science techniques, specifically natural language processing, can let us leverage all that's being written in social media about people's reactions to events, including musical events. It's just amazing the possibilities that lay before us. And ultimately, we want to use this presentation as a call to action. We think that there are so many avenues worth exploring, but we've identified, three specific ones related to music and well-being. That is, again, depression and suicide reduction, issues surrounding elder care, and issues surrounding stress management and hospital recovery. And this is just the beginning. I do want to note that we're coming up on 30 minutes, and we wanted to be able to respond to any questions or comments that may be coming in. I guess as I'm just looking through our notes here, I see one thing that we haven't touched on yet, and that's social surrogacy.
Oh yeah,
I think this is another really fascinating thing that's maybe worth expanding on a little bit more with the time that we have left.
Yeah. I think of this as kind of music as a friend. First of all, this and again, this is all grounded in some research, and references can be provided in the research database. But clearly, positive association with life satisfaction. The quote that we heard earlier in the video, with various forms, specifically music. So positive association with music, with life satisfaction, compared to other forms of media, movies, etc. This idea of social surrogacy was really, really exciting for me to come across, where in some cases music provides equivalent surrogacy, no more, no less than someone in person. So fulfilling those social needs, how a song, how a piece of music can fulfill that social need, no more, no less than having someone standing next to you. I thought that was remarkable. I love that expression. This feeling of being understood, music offering a sense of empathy. And then, Peter, I know you're a fan of this emotional communion, where music as an emotional communion almost parallels those kind of interpersonal interactions. So music as a social surrogate, quite powerful. Music as an emotional communion, quite powerful.
This is a wonderfully relevant subtopic because, of course, when we look at all the things that music does, tonight's focus has been on health and well-being, but in fact, it has a huge educational element too. WHAM is quite dedicated to promoting social and emotional learning for our communities. And one of the key metrics that we observe there is the number of stable adult relationships and the nature of the support network that children have available to them. And surrogacy is not fully the substitute for a real life adult, but music education brings all this together, where you can have life mentors, you can have people that provide, outside the family perspective and guidance through life while developing these musical skills, while developing social and emotional capacities that are so clearly and directly tied to successes later on in life. So again, it's just remarkable to me how, if we look at the huge, web of things that impact our life, music really impacts, the clear majority of them in ways that others cannot.
I think something we've known, something we've always known, something we've known intuitively. Again, this fertile foundation of research that's being done or has been done, continuing to be done, has been really, really encouraging. I think what it I don't know, where it leads me is it reminds me that hope does equal action. That this, through continued hope, through continued stories of resilience, we're going to drive towards action. More specifically, and we've already talked about this, but more specifically, music therapists and suicide prevention training, partnerships, tighter partnerships with behavioral health care providers, job training, the job training that we referenced earlier, digital music therapeutics, the neuroimaging that's happening, music specifically being composed to address what's happening in the brain health, and then biofeedback. Imagine, Peter, you held it up earlier, but imagine something happens, biofeedback provides some data that instantly serves up music when you need it, music in the moment. That's only a matter of time. So again, just really, really encouraged from where the research is, where we're going. We have a lot of work to do. Don't get me wrong. We have a lot more work to do, but music to facilitate greater awareness, music to help prevent suicide, music to intervene, as we learned earlier about Logic's song. And then, God forbid, music in postvention settings have been found to be incredibly powerful too. So.
Well, again, feel like we've just barely scratched the surface of all that's possible here. And on that note, we have available on our website, www.weareallmusic.org, an abstract that Brian put together with his team that gives a pretty thorough overview of where we are from a research perspective. And from that, we will have additional potential videos like this and other supporting papers that we post on our website. So we again have a lot of work, but we have some pretty clear avenues in front of us in terms of where we think we can have a positive impact and really move the needle in terms of both a better understanding of how this all works, but also how to translate that into better policies, better levels of funding, and ultimately better life outcomes for as many people as we can possibly affect. So with that, we're a little over, but Brian, thank you so much. For all you've done and your help tonight, and thanks to everybody at WHAM behind the scenes for putting this together. As you might appreciate, there's
Awesome.
There's a lot that goes into that, but we thank everybody for their help. We'll have this posted on our website, and we really, really appreciate all those who have tuned in, and hopefully, we've help people learn a thing or two, but more than that, kept them interested in the work that we're doing. So with that, thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Peter.